Maldives is a magical place, full of majesty and mystery. Its chain of 26 atolls are situated atop the Chagos Laccadive Ridge, a vast submarine mountain range in the Indian Ocean. With an average ground level elevation of 1.5 meters, 4 feet 11 inches above sea level. It is the world's lowest country, with even its highest natural point being the lowest in the world at 2.4 meters or 7 feet 10 inches. The earliest settlers to the Maldives were most likely wayward Austronesian thatched reed boat sailing migrants, traveling from the South Pacific Islands to settle in Madagascar on the east coast of Africa. Seafaring from Dibal, modern Pakistan, began during the Indus Valley Civilization, 4,600 to 3,900 years ago. The earliest historical record of the Maldives describes the arrival there of Sinhalese people, descended from the Magadha prince Vijayana, 2,543 until 2,505 years ago, exiled from the ancient city known as Sinhumpura in northeast India. He and his party of several hundred landed in Sri Lanka and some in the Maldives, circa 543 to 483 BC, according to the Mahavansa. One of the ships that sailed with Prince Vijayana, who went to Sri Lanka around 500 BC, went adrift and arrived at an island called Mahila Dvipika, which may be identified with the Maldives. It is also said that, at that time, the people from Mahila Dvipika used to travel to Sri Lanka. Dravidian Tamils from Tamilakam, southernmost tip of India, in the Sangam period, 300 BC until 300 AD, settled on Giravaru Island and established a capital and kingly rule in Malay, where the people granted permission to a visiting king, Koimala Kalo, prior to the foundation of his kingdom there. Malabari seafaring culture led to Malayalai Keralites settling the Laccadives, and the Maldives were evidently viewed as an extension of that archipelago. Sindhis in modern Pakistan may have also migrated to the Maldives early on based on later Jat, Gujar titles, and Gotra names. So the Maldives was a cultural melting pot from very early on in the now known history of early civilizations, and it may have likely been a port of call in trans-Indian Ocean reed boat seafaring as well. There is a global vestigial memory of our species' pre-Ice Age conditions, and that is that, to this day, a simple game may be played just by interlacing one's fingers through a loop of string. European versions of this are called cat's cradle, but the game seems to have originated very long ago and near Polynesia in the South Pacific. The geographic midpoint between the earlier oceanic origins of this game and the later Asiatic versions so important to formulating very early Occidental concepts of metaphysics, such as Semitic Kabbalah, is between Surabaya in Java and the Makaresi and Bugis of South Celebes, in short, throughout the East Indian archipelago, where the game is played as well, and called Toike Toike, the ladder game, derived from Toike, meaning steps. Modern conventional wisdom dictates that the first Maldivians did not leave any archaeological remains, and that their buildings were probably built of wood, palm fronds, and other perishable materials, which would have quickly decayed in the salt and wind of the tropical climate. Moreover, chiefs or headmen did not reside in elaborate stone palaces, nor did their region require the construction of large temples or compounds. Nevertheless, we may also learn Norwegian adventurer and ethnographer Thor Heyerdahl, October 6, 1914, until April 18, 2002, investigated the mounds found on the Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean and found solar cycle-oriented foundations and courtyards, as well as statues with elongated earlobes. Heyerdahl believed that these finds fit with his theory of a seafaring civilization that originated in what is now Sri Lanka, that colonized the Maldives, and that influenced or founded the cultures of ancient South America and Easter Island. Heyerdahl discovered not only evidence of megalithic and brick architecture, arranged in circular arenas and square temples, alike the Norte Chico structures in Peru, but an array of carved stone bust artifacts that appear to span many different eras and cultures. Thus, the Maldives could have been such a multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multicultural hub in prehistoric times that a speculation may be posed as to if it continued to be used as a form of museum, housing these artifacts from dispersed, distant cultures at a location geographically centered between them all. However romantically charming such a theory as a megalithic Maldives museum may seem, the reality behind Maldives' true importance is far more mundane, and yet also more shocking than even that, should it ever prove true. The real reason for all this building up of prehistoric Maldives is far simpler: cowrie shells. The Maldives and Laccadive Islands supplied Cypria moneta, so-called money cowrie, for trade for most of the world up until the 18th century. Cowries are highly prized as a low-denomination means of exchange for several of the same reasons that modern metal coins are valued. They are durable, difficult to forge, and have a limited source of supply. During the 19th century, the increasing use of metal coins led to a relatively rapid decline in the cowrie trade. Today, the once great Maldivian money cowrie trade is all but dead, with only a few handfuls of cowries exported annually. Use of shell money occurred on every populated continent: America, Asia, Africa, and Australia. The shell most widely used worldwide as currency was the shell of Cypria moneta, the money cowrie. This species is most abundant in the Indian Ocean and was collected in the Maldive Islands, in Sri Lanka, along the Malabar coast, in Borneo, and on other East Indian islands, and in various parts of the African coast, from Ras Hufan to Mozambique. Cowrie shell money was important at one time or another in the trade networks of Africa, South Asia, and East Asia. Monetaria moneta, a species of small sea snail, a marine gastropod mollusk in the family Cypridea, the cowries, can be found widely in Indo-Pacific tropical waters. It is present in numerous regions, including East and South Africa, Madagascar, the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, Maldives, Eastern Polynesia, Galapagos, Clipperton, and Cocos Islands off Central America, southern Japan, Midway and Hawaii, and northern New South Wales and Lord Howe Island. It lives in intertidal rocky areas and shallow tide pools among seaweed, coral remains, and empty bivalve shells. It can be found on and under rocks in shallow water and on exposed reefs at low tide. It feeds on algae and marine vegetation, growing on loose rocks and pieces of dead coral. The Maldivians developed a simple, highly efficient means of collecting the cowrie. Bundles of coconut palm fronds would be laid out in shallow lagoons, and the cowries would then aggregate on them to feed on the layers of detritus that accumulate on the leaves. After some time, the bundles are pulled out onto the beach, where the cowries die in the hot sun and can be shaken off onto the sand. Dead animals are then buried in a pit, so that the flesh rots away with the assistance of invertebrate detritivores, leaving clean, empty shells. Cowrie shells may be rolled like dice that have only two sides, a head's side, that is the back of the shell, and a tail's side, that is the shell's mouth. Thus, they have some oblique form of use in very ancient and obscure divination rituals, supposedly included in modern African animism and in Jyotisha, or Vedic Hindu astrology, where 108 shells are used in a complex process for horary astrology, an ancient branch of horoscopic astrology, in which an astrologer attempts to answer a question by constructing a horoscope for the exact time at which the question was received and understood by the astrologer. This practice, continued today in Kerala, India, calls the cowrie shells kavadis and proposes a pair of counting experiments be performed using them. The first, the Prashnam horoscope, rolls the 108 shells initially. The second, the Prasna horoscope, then deducts the amount that turned heads up as belonging to the ruling planet at that time. The two results are then compared and a prediction made. At some point, cowrie shells went from being used as beads in jewelry as a show of status to being used as an economic means of counting out assigned values. Because it remains unclear during which stage in our own evolution this transition occurred, it cannot necessarily be ruled out that use of cowrie shells as money of exchange may date back as long ago as the first now known use of tally sticks, such as the Aurignacian Lobombo bones from around 30,000 years ago, as a form of money of account. At this same period of time, we would have been sharing caves with Neanderthals, first combining animal hides with textile clothing, and first developing the ability to form more complex verbal sounds, the prototypes of modern words. In China, from some 3,000 years ago, the pictogram for cowrie shell became the term used to symbolize money as a concept in itself. Starting in about 1500 AD and continuing into the late 1800s, the Coast Miwok, Ohlone, Patwin, Pomo, and Wapo peoples of Central California used the marine bivalve Saxidomus to make shell money. On the east coast of North America, the members of the Iroquois Confederacy and Algonquin tribes, such as the Shinnecock tribe, ground beads called wampum, which were cut from the purple part of the shell of the marine bivalve Mercenaria mercenaria, more commonly known as the hard clam or quahog. In Orissa, India, cowrie shells, locally called kaudi, were accepted as currency until 1805, when they were outlawed by the British East India Company, an event which contributed to the 1817 Paik Rebellion there. Trade in cowrie shell money was still prevalent throughout Africa by 1850 AD, when German explorer Heinrich Barth observed it in Kano, Kuka, Gando, Muniama of Bornu, Timbuktu, and the Kingdom of Congo, where the cowrie currency was called Nzimbu. In 1882, local trade in the Solomon Islands was carried on by means of a coinage of shell beads, small shells laboriously ground down to the required size by the local women. No more than were actually needed were made, and, as the process was difficult, the value of the coinage was stably maintained. In the Papua New Guinea island of East New Britain, shell currency is still legal, and a fixed exchange rate to the kina, national currency, is maintained.